What William lacked was a purpose greater than that what he wanted for himself, and a willingness to live for the good of others and allowing his God-given abilities to be used for his kingdom. So there's a verse in Mark 8, verse 8:36. It says, "For what shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his own soul?" When people look at this verse, they often associate it with money, but I think it has an even much deeper meaning. You will see people trying to fill that void in their heart in many ways. Material things, fame, sex, relationship, position, and many other things. So often people use alcohol and drugs as addictions to take the pain off because of the lack of purpose in their lives. When you look at the core of this verse, it really talks about people wanting purpose. I think it's in the DNA of each of us as people that at the end of our lives, we want to know that we made a difference. We want to know that we mattered. So I'd like to look at an example of someone else who had someone else that lived a totally opposite life, an example of somebody that knew very clearly what his purpose in life was. Joseph had a lot of things going his way in life at first. He was handsome. He was the firstborn son of Jacob and Rachel, and therefore he was his father's favorite son. He had great dreams that made him feel good about himself. But then one day, his entire life changed. Can you imagine what it would have been like to be hated by your siblings so much that they were willing to sell you out of their lives? He was forced to leave a comfortable life that he had known, full of love from his parents, and to go forth into the unknown. How frightening that must have been for a boy of 17, yet God had his hand on Joseph. God had a divine purpose for this young man. Joseph didn't know why God had chosen this path until the very end, yet he never seemed to waver. I'd like to look at a passage of Scripture in Genesis 39, verses 1 to 9. It says, "Now Joseph had been taken to Egypt to Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials. The captain of the guard brought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did." Can you imagine that? You're living a life of such diligence, such trust, that at a young age, your master gives you basically rights to his household. From the time he put him in charge of his house and of all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in his house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything he had except the food that he ate. Now Joseph was well built and handsome. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in his house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted into my care. No one is greater in his house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me but you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" Now you want to talk about a person that had purpose. You look at all the things that he could have said, or he could have thought that God forgot about him. There was many things that could have been like, you know what, God must not really care about it if he allows this to happen. But he was unwavering in his faith of God. One of the most blessed truths that is revealed in the Bible is that God has a special purpose to fulfill through the lives of his faithful servants. From a human perspective, the events of Joseph's life that resulted in him becoming a slave in Egypt don't appear to have any significant purpose or meaningful benefit. Because of his brother's hatred, Joseph was exiled to Egypt as a slave. Because of the lie of his master's wife, he was put into prison. Because of the forgetfulness of a fellow prisoner that Joseph had helped, he was forgotten and remained in prison for an additional 2 years. Finally, by God's grace, Joseph was able to supernaturally interpret 2 of Pharaoh's dreams, and as a result was released from prison and promoted to become the prime minister of Pharaoh. This promotion made Joseph a very powerful and wealthy man in Egypt. Joseph became the overseer of a vast amount of grain that would deliver Egypt and many people from future famine. This was the main purpose that God had for Joseph's life. He had absolute control over who would receive any grain that was stored up in Egypt. The future famine was the way that God would use Joseph to bring him and his family together again. And when you think about the children of Israel, that was what saved a lot of those people from salvation or from starvation, was because they were able to go to Egypt to eat. And, who would have known that in the early parts of Joseph's life when all these things were coming together? So this morning I would like to touch on 3 things that I think are key to living a life of purpose. The first one is living a life of gratitude. Proverbs 17:22 said, "A joyful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones." And I would like to touch on some of the things that I feel are instrumental in us recognizing living a life of gratitude. Thankfulness for the little things. In those times when we yearn to have more in our lives, we should dwell on the things we already have. In doing so, so often we find that our lives are already full to overflowing. How often in our lives do we miss the little things, like smelling flowers, watching our children sleep? That's one of the things that I find myself doing sometimes. You go into their bed and they're sleeping and their chest is rising and falling, and you hear them breathing, and you think of all the things that you wish you could have done yet, the things that you did. Don't miss the little things. The gift of friends. I couldn't resist this. So Tina's in EBI right now, so I knew that she wouldn't see it. But this is Tina and Maria and Dory, and they have been friends for all through elementary school, all through high school. And actually, 2 of them are together in EBI right now. But don't miss the gift of friends. It is a wealthy man indeed who calculates riches not in gold, but in friends. The next one is the gift of work. He who loves to work never labors. Whoever works his land will have plenty of bread, but he who follows worthless pursuits lacks sense. Proverbs 12, verse 11. How often do you hear people talking about how Monday mornings is a drudgery, or how the weekends are so great, but really what you're saying is that you're not there to add value to other people. Like, I truly believe if work is something that you are there to serve, you're there to help other people, there'll be meaning in work. So don't underestimate the gift of work. The gift of learning. Education is a lifelong journey whose destination only expands as you learn more. Psalms 32 verse 8 says, "I will instruct you and teach you in the way that you should go." And as you see people get older, some people kind of think, well, I've kind of learned it all, and then other people continue to learn and grow until they pass away. And that's always been an inspiration to me. I would say my dad is probably one of my biggest inspirations of a constant learner. I know that probably about 8 years ago we started a book club where me is like, the rest of my life, I want to continue to learn. So don't underestimate the gift of learning. The next one is the gift of problems. Problems can only be avoided by exercising good judgment. Good judgment can only be gained by experiencing life's problems. Who looks at problems as a gift? Well, if you understand gifts or problems as being something that strengthens character, you start to look at them different. So typically, somebody's character doesn't come out in times of good, in the good times, in the time of easy. But typically, someone's character comes out when there's difficulties, when there's problems. So good judgment can only be gained by life's problems. So let's not underestimate the gift of problems. The gift of laughter. So this is one of my favorite pictures. This is Ash and Tina hanging out with one of their cousins from Oregon and just having a good time. So laughter is a good medicine for the soul. Our world is desperately in need of such medicine. Psalms 126 verse 2 says, "We are filled with laughter and we sang for joy." And I want you to look at the end of this verse. "And the nations said, 'What amazing things the Lord has done for them.'" So thinking about what attracts you to people. Typically, you're not that attractive to people that just look like they're miserable or look like life is just drudgery. But you're attracted to people that have joy, that love life, that want to do good for people. So don't underestimate the gift of laughter. Next one, the gift of giving. The only way you can truly get more out of life for yourself is to give part of yourself away. 2 Corinthians 9 verse 7 says, "Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver." And then the last one is the gift of family. Some people are born into wonderful families. Others have to find or create them. Being a member of a family is a priceless privilege which costs nothing but love. And that's something that I take for granted. Being brought up in a culture where family is one of our strengths, I would say, as a culture, as Anabaptist people. And it's also one of the things that I know I can take for granted. And sometimes I just don't appreciate it as much as I could. But don't underestimate the gift of a family and how that can be a testimony in the world that we live in. So, number one, talking about So number one, we're talking about living a life of gratitude. Number two, I want to talk about is protecting your mind. So the question is, what does it mean to protect your mind? Even though we cannot always protect what we see at first glance, we can set ourselves up for success by guarding the places that we go and also protecting what we read and what we watch. You may ask, how do we do that? So what are you reading? What is your reading material diet? I truly believe this phrase, the next phrase, is very true. The person that you will be in 5 years depends on the books you read, the food you eat, the people that you spend time with, the habits you adopt, the conversation that you engage in. There's so many things that we can set ourselves up for failure or success. And one of the things is we just wrapped up with the youth guys on Wednesday evening going through the Conquer series. And by the way, that was a tremendous blessing. Thanks for allowing me to spend the 6 weeks with your sons. But one of the things that they played in that final video that I never had quite thought of in that content, they were like, they're going through a lot of different ways to set yourself up. But at the end, it talks about protecting the food you eat, the sleep that you get, the exercise that you have. Like, those are ways that you can set yourself up to put your mind in a positive track of or state of being. Like, there's also ways that you can totally do that so that, lack of sleep, eating bad food, just not being mindful of what you're doing, like you're setting yourself up for failure. And the next one is, hang on. So I got my wife gave me permission to put this one in, but thinking about what am I reading? Is it the 6 o'clock news. So I know that all of us can get into politics, news, and that's great. But don't let it kill your creativity. I mean, I do very little of it because I've found that I get all frustrated. It's things that I can't I can't problem solve. So finally, I'm like, I can't do this. It killed my creativity. Now, I will say that with a grain of salt because, some people like to be up to current events, but don't get caught in too much news to where it can kill your creativity. Is it constantly looking at others' lives on social media? Is it good books and podcasts? This is something that when you look at a book, like that is someone's life. Oftentimes, that's somebody's life in a period of 60 to 80 years compressed into what you can read in 6 hours. Like, that's amazing. Like, when you can take what somebody has gleaned over a lifetime and you can read, and that's a huge step forward. Or is it the holy, inspired Word of God? So what is your reading material? What are you mostly putting into your mind? So the next one, I said, protect your golden hour. And this is a new concept that I learned about this year, and I've been implementing it since the beginning of the year. It says, you are today where your thoughts have brought you. You will be tomorrow where your thoughts will take you. Proverbs 23, verse 7 says, for as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So this is something that I gained from a book that I've been reading, and I'll just read a portion of this that was just a concept that I just instantly gravitated toward. There is a specific hour, the sweet spot of our day, that has the biggest impact on both your short-term and long-term success. What you do during this 1 hour has effects that far outweigh what you do the other hours of the day. It determines how productive and purposeful you are, as well as influences how well your brain functions. If you use this 1 hour powerfully, the next 23 has a much greater chance to be successful. If you don't, they can be wasted. For most people, the last hour of the day is being used by media or binge eating. What you do during the hour before bed sets the tone for the rest of your day, or for the following day. This is where your deepest habits are formed. It doesn't only determine how well you sleep, but it dictates how you wake up. When you end your day poorly and without a plan, you will compromise the next 24 hours. Research shows that the last hour before bed, 90% of people use their smartphones while in bed before they sleep. The scrolling and staring cycle is a dangerous draw on tomorrow's productivity and creativity. Staring at your phone right before bed is one of the worst things that you can do if you want to live an effective, present, and happy life. It has a negative impact on your mind. I was like, wow. So the question is, so thinking through that is, I'm like, so often, like, I know my wife is often, turning the lights off and, wrapping everything up. So I'd go to bed 15 minutes before she does. I'm, usually waiting. And often I would find myself just scrolling Facebook or YouTube or whatever, just kind of scrolling. And I read this and I'm like, what the world? I'm spending all night long. My mind is processing other people's lives all night long. Like, I don't want that for myself. So then the question is, shoot, you can't read that. I'll read it. So basically the question was, how do you fix that? What is a positive way to end your day? Number one, put your phone away or put it in airplane mode 30 minutes before you go to bed. Number two, grab your journal or make notes in your notes section of your phone. Number three, write down 3 wins or 3 things that you are grateful for that happened that day. Number 4, write down 3 things that you would like to accomplish the following day. End that with a prayer, and then let your mind process all the things that you are grateful for and the things that you would like to accomplish the next day. Again, Proverbs 3, verse 7, for as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So this was something that I read, and I've been doing this since the beginning of the year, and I was sharing it with one of our teams at work. And there's this young lady that she's part of a finance team, and she was born in India. They came with her parents here when she was 3 years old. She was raised in a Hindu family, and she came to know the Lord early in her life, and because of that, her early on, her family mainly rejected her. But she said, you know what? I did that in college. She said, I didn't really ever tell people this, but that's why I had such great grades. And she is one of the smartest people that I've met. But she said that I was getting very average grades. And what I would do is the hour or two before I'd go to sleep, I would go through all my summaries. I would go over my tests. She would read everything, close her book. She said, when I went to sleep. And she said, you got to sleep 7 to 8 hours to let your mind process that. And she said, instantly, I started getting better grades. I like that. I like that. So I had asked her if I could share her story. So yeah, that was a tremendous affirmation of what I had read. And it was just like, you know what? I want that. So don't ever underestimate what your subconscious mind will do as you sleep. And now the third one is be mindful of your friendships. So you may look at this and you just see a picture of 4 people. Well, when I look at this, it's a combination of a lot of friends that have had different varying impacts on my life. So that's my father-in-law there, and he's a man that during our dating life and our early marriage, he helped shape a lot of the ways that I thought. Great mentor of mine, a friend of mine. Here's John Diener. He's one of my best friends, one of the guys that I business partner. We do life together. We spend a lot of time together, and just a great guy to be around. And then there's Tony King, and he was a young man that had asked me to mentor him years ago, and had asked me to keep him accountable for some of the things that he was working through in his personal life. So I look at that, and those are 3 different friends that have had a big impact on my life. So be mindful of your friendships. Proverbs 17, verse 17 says, iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. Proverbs 13, verse 2 says, he that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed. To go along with that, I also believe that you become like those that you spend a lot of time with. There's a saying that says, birds of a feather will flock together. So the question to ask myself is, who am I attracting? Am I attracting mean, negative people into my life? Am I attracting loving, kind people into my life? God has, 2 Timothy 1 verse 7 says, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but He has given us, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. You attract those who you are like. What is in your heart? We think the good life is actually by looking good, feeling good, and having the goods. If money would make us happy, then the happiest people in the world would have the most money, and we know that that's not true. So the good life is not about feeling good, looking good, and having the goods, but it is about doing good. It is about giving your life away. Significance in life doesn't come from status, because you can always find someone that has more than you do. It doesn't come from salary, but it comes from serving. It is in giving our life away that we find meaning. That is where we find who we are. The purpose of influence is not to build your ego, your net worth, but your purpose for influence is to speak up for those who have no influence, the widows, the homeless, those that have no means of paying you back. So once again, what's in your heart? What is in your hand? What is your identity? And what is your influence? It's not about me, but it's about making the world a better place. Psalms 119 verse 9 says, "Wherewith shall a young man cleanse his way? By taking heed thereunto according to thy word. With my whole heart have I sought thee. O let me not wander from thy commandments. Thy word have I hid in my heart, that I might not sin against thee." So to wrap this up, I want to recap. What does it mean to live a life of purpose? I truly believe it is